Thank you very much. Thank you. It's very nice of you all to come out, and sorry for all the technical stuff, the technical delays. Hopefully this won't bore you to tears. It's kind of a history lesson. It's about the early years of Gaza after the independence of Israel, and it's going to give you some of the context of what this book is about, which is mainly two incidents, one that took place in a town called Han Yunis and another that took place in a town called Rafah in 1956. So I'm just going to start this presentation. Let's see if it works. Can you see that okay? Okay, I'm sorry about the people who can't see this. But Israel's War of Independence began in 1948, and it was immediately attacked by neighboring Arab states. Egypt's army was defeated, but it managed to hang on to the Gaza Strip, a small sliver of land. There were many refugees. You probably know about the refugee issue with the Palestinians. About 750,000 Palestinians were made refugees, either fleeing the fighting or they were expelled. 200,000 of them ended up in the Gaza Strip, and that tripled the population of Gaza. And so they came there with nothing, and some of them were put up in mosques or schools, but mostly what they found, as I show here on the bottom, is the sand. Can you all hear me okay? All right. I talked to some refugees who remember this period and talked about the development of, refugee society in Gaza. And they told me that a lot of them just had to dig a hole in the ground and live in that for a while. And some of them just lived under the trees, under the palm trees. At some point, the Quakers stepped in and gave out tents. So people began to live in tents. Then in 1949, the UN put together an agency called UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which still exists today, to administer to the needs of the Palestinian refugees in the Near East. And they organized the camps. So that by the mid-50s, camps looked something like this. And this image, I'm basing it on photographs I found at the UN archive in Gaza City. There were rooms, like about 4 rooms per house. Extended families lived in these rooms. There was a courtyard. But it was relatively overcrowded, but still much better conditions than the tents, obviously. The Israeli Foreign Ministry in 1949 came up with a report basically to predict what might happen to the Palestinian refugees. And I'm going to read from the report, which I found quoted in Tom Segev's book, 1949. He's an Israeli historian. According to the Israeli Foreign Ministry report, the most adaptable and best survivors would manage by a process of natural selection, and the others will waste away. Some will die, but most will turn into human debris and social outcasts, and probably join the poorest classes in the Arab countries. And indeed, the Palestinian refugees in Gaza were very poor. They didn't have land. They were surviving on handouts. And across the border, in a new country called Israel, their old fields, their old homes. Some of them began to cross over the border, which at that time was not guarded like it is today with electric fences and all that sort of thing. And they went back to their homes and would pick produce and bring things back from their homes. And at some point, they started, taking things from Israeli settlements around Gaza, which at that point weren't particularly well guarded either. They'd take livestock and things like that. Now, Israel was taking in a lot of Jewish refugees after the war. It was taking in hundreds of thousands of people, and it wasn't going to continents that. It was not going to continents what they called infiltrators coming in. So in 1949, according to the Israeli historian Benny Morris, 1,000 Palestinian refugees who crossed over back into Israel were shot. There were shoot-to-kill orders. By 1956, between 2,700 and 5,000 Palestinian refugees returning into Israel were shot. On the other hand, Palestinians would sometimes came across Israelis and killed them out of retribution or just in chance encounters. And according to Benny Mars, by 1956, about 300 Israelis were killed in this way, civilians. At some point, an Israeli bicyclist was killed by these infiltrators, and the Israeli government at the highest level decided they were going to punish Egypt. Now remember, the Egyptians were administering Gaza, and so they controlled the border. And Israel thought, if we hit Egypt, that will signal to them that they better clamp down. So here I have Ben-Gurion on the left, and then the prime minister at the time was Sharat, and Moshe Dayan, the iconic Israeli general with the eye patch. They planned a raid on Gaza City, an Egyptian military position led by Ariel Sharon. And this commando raid went a little wrong. It didn't work out quite as planned, but one of the consequences was an ambush on a truck carrying Palestinian soldiers. The Palestinian soldiers were in the sort of Egyptian officered army. In this truck ambush, about 22 Palestinians were killed. The next day in Gaza, there were riots directed at the Egyptian authorities by Palestinians because basically they felt, we're not protected, our people are being killed. The president of Egypt at the time was Jamal Abdel Nasser, and Nasser thought, okay, I need to hit back at Israel, but not in a way that's going to provoke a war. At this time, Nasser was trying to get weapons from the Soviet bloc. He wanted to build his army up. He didn't want to have a war before he actually had those arms in hand. So what he did, he got this guy, his name is Mustafa Hafez. And Mustafa Hafez was an Egyptian intelligence officer. And Mustafa Hafez was tasked with putting together a group of Palestinian guerrillas, which they had the familiar name that you remember from the Iraq War, the Fedayeen. And the Fedayeen were sort of, a lot of them were basically drawn from what you might say was Palestinian riffraff. He went to the jails, got people out of jails. Some of them were murderers. Some of them were military men. And the Fedayeen were sent out on missions, and they had a campaign for about a week and killed about 15 Israelis, a number of civilians included. I tried to track down one of these people. I thought there weren't many of them, maybe several score actually were around in the 50s, but I did manage to find one guy. This guy here, he was quite a strange character. He'd actually started his military career in the British Army in World War II. Then he was in the Jordanian Army and like the cavalry, and I mean, he was a real military guy. And he told me about what was going on. I had 4 interviews with this guy, and I was really trying to get stuff out of him. He told me a lot of interesting general information, but I wanted something really specific from him, like, tell me what you did. And he was always sort of beating around the bush whenever I asked him that.
This program was produced by PDX Justice Media Productions of Portland, Oregon. This program is available in full via the PDX Justice Media Productions website at pdxjustice.org. You can also find this program at the Vimeo Home for Videos website at vimeo.com. Just search on the keywords PDX Justice and the speaker's name, Joe Sacco. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for supporting listener-sponsored radio, public access cable television, net neutrality, independent bookstores, and all forms of grassroots democratic community media.